Good morning to everyone in this summit. What an absolute honor to be surrounded by such brilliance and thought leadership, and not the easiest task to have to follow on from Dr. Ramakopa, but we'll give it our best. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a senior manager within Deloitte Consulting Supply Chain and Network Operations team. With more than 19 years combined consulting and industry experience. My dream as a little girl was to grow up and be a stage actress. So I suppose this isn't too far removed from the truth. However, my first job was in supply chain. I was a commercial officer to the hand and power tools buyer in Macro, South Africa. So not quite your standard little girl's dream, but I absolutely loved it. Since then, I've had a couple of roles and have ended up in consulting, supply chain and procurement consulting, which is a great passion of mine. It is Maya Angelou who said, "I am grateful to be a woman. I must have done something great in a previous life to get there." But let's talk a little bit about supply chain and beyond and where supply chain is going. So within the context of the fourth industrial revolution, the symbolic relationship between supply chain, innovation, and technology continues at an accelerating pace. Pre-COVID, the supply chain had already been evolving into a digital supply chain network, meaning that traditional linear modes have been collapsing into a set of dynamic nodes and networks. The result is always on digital supply networks, which are dynamic, integrated networks characterized by a high velocity, continuous flow of information and analytics. Such supply networks transcend traditional barriers to enable external collaboration with suppliers, ecosystem partners, and customers, enabling asset sharing and leveraging massive volumes of data. In her keynote address, Dr. Ramakopa mentioned the need for ethical and transparent supply chains. Blockchain, for instance, allows this through a digital ledger that, for example, allows the consumers of a yogurt brand in the US to scan a QR code on a tub of yogurt that they want to buy in the supermarket to determine the sources of the ingredients of the product, right down to what the cows that were milked for the yogurt were eating or being fed. There are many other use cases for insights into practices such as child labor, sustainability in terms of environmental, water and electricity uses, and many more. The impact of digitalization on procurement is that it becomes an intelligent supply function, enabling multi-tier supply collaboration and synchronization across multiple channels and categories. Sharing of real-time visibility then further enables planning and execution across the entire time horizon. An example is Amazon Prime in the US that have got this really, really right. They've got a very good idea of where their key customers are located, and based on their previous buying patterns, preemptively ship goods that they would order, hopefully, to their nearest locations. And the reason for this is they've got their demand planning so right through this artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms that it is cheaper for them to not get the sale than it would have otherwise been to, at urgency, ship out those items at great distances and at great costs to them. In the digital age, predictive source to contract means that supply bases, prices, and costs are all visible, empowering professionals to reach transparent agreements with high-value suppliers. Governance is clear and transparent. Procure to pay becomes automated in the digital world. Transactions become routine and require very minimal human intervention. And as these digital technologies become more mature, payback periods have radically reduced. For instance, recently, a beverage supplier in South Africa was able to implement a full suite of digital procurement tools, and their payback period, after which they started achieving return on investment, was 9 months. And this was significantly shorter than what they had anticipated in their business case. And this is just off the back of cost reduction through efficiency. Furthermore, they now have better analytics, better visibility, more transparency, and user-defined reporting in terms of what is where. Supplier relationship management also becomes proactive, as risk mitigation strategies are now preemptive allowing professionals to focus on continually optimizing operations as opposed to conducting damage control after the fact. But ladies, as we know, enter COVID. So it's no surprise that, according to Deloitte's 2021 Global Chief Procurement Officer Survey, digital transformation as a CPO priority increased by 20% from 2019, with 76% of global CPOs making it a top priority for their organization. It has also become clear that agility serves as the solution to an increasing complex procurement landscape, with 75% of the CPOs having enhanced supplier information sharing as their top supply risk mitigation strategy, followed closely by activating alternative supply sources and shoring up and storing up inventories. Amidst all of this, however, the pandemic has had a massive impact on women in the workplace. The recent Deloitte Women at Work survey highlighted some interesting findings for South African working women in particular. Before COVID-19, around 7 in 10 South African women ranked their job satisfaction as good or extremely good, whereas today, only 4 in 10 do. Women's work-life balance has also suffered. Before COVID-19, 71% said that they had a good or extremely good work-life balance, while today, only 31% say this. In addition, women's well-being has been negatively impacted over the course of the pandemic. Beforehand, 67% of South African working women ranked their mental well-being as good or extremely good, while today, only 32 say that their mental health is positive at the moment. This raises a bunch of concerning thoughts around our role as women leaders in South Africa and how we are coaching and mentoring those we work with. And while it is wonderful to pay tribute, and I'm so grateful that our previous speakers have done that, to the remarkable ladies that have come before us, I'd like to quote Brene Brown when I say, we have to be the women we want our daughters to be. And what does this mean to the people within our teams? And on that note, I would like to hand over to our second panelist, Dr. Hilda Mafunga, who will talk to us a little bit more about the role of women and also very much centered on public procurement. Thank you, Dr. Hilda.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Genevieve. I just want to say that, my job has been done, like the role of procurement in public sector, because Dr. Gwen did everything that I was supposed to talk about. Now I don't have anything to talk about it all because everything has been explained. But anyway, from my side, I think we have heard that public procurement is so important because it then serves as to how goods or services are delivered in the country. And from my side, I would say that I would like to encourage, especially women, to take part in public procurement. I know there was a question that was answered, that was posed earlier on to Dr. Gwen, saying, how is the public sector helping the women? There are a lot of programs. You'll find that each tender, which is maybe given out there, it will have some attributes for it to encourage women, or which I'll just say the previously disadvantaged people, to take part in the process. But I think the challenge that most women have for them maybe to effectively take part in the public procurement goes to the fact that maybe the paperwork required. So there's a number of paperwork that is required, and women sometimes, because maybe of some of the challenges that you've just put across about the balancing the work life and the home life. So it takes a lot of time to put in through the required documentation. But at the end of it, all will be well, because we actually have points that are given if such tenders are given from previously disadvantaged people. So just to encourage everybody listening here that there is a lot of opportunities within the public sector for procurement, whether as a worker, and I think as an employee for public sector, it has been taken into consideration that there are a lot of opportunities, but also for people who just want to take part in the tendering, and also there's a number of opportunities there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Hilda. I'd also like to please hand over to next Tebogo Moromane, who will speak a little bit around what organizations are doing in response to how the pandemic, how procurement has been changed by the pandemic, rather.
Thank you, Genevieve, and thank you to the CIPS leadership for the invitation. Thank you for the speakers that came before us. I think, as Dr. Mafunga has said, somehow we all had the same theme of what needed to be said. And Dr. Gwen has much as she's not a supply chain person, you know, she has talked a lot about what we wanted to talk about. But what I will talk about is what organizations are doing in response to the pandemic and how it has changed supply chain. I think, as we all know, supply chain is policy and compliance driven. And if we do not adhere to the policies and procedures, you know, there's a risk of us as supply chain professionals being unethical and or being hauled before the courts, you know, to go and explain the things that we did not know, we did not do right. I think the South African government through National Treasury has given us regulations such as the PPPFA, the BEE, the PFMA, and also we need to be adhering to those. I think what the pandemic has done in supply chain as a response to the question that I posed, that we are now able, supply chain is now, you know, agile and it is flexible, but that flexibility most of the time has been done within the ambit of the law. And the pandemic also has assisted us in ensuring that the turnaround times for procuring goods and services, especially that were required for the pandemic, for the response to the pandemic, has been quite quick. The storage and the distribution, you know, to the different countries, we have seen that the vaccines were taken or were distributed to the countries that, you know, in fairly a very quick manner. And also the acceptance of the public of the supply chain role that the supply chain role has played. There has been, you know, other challenges that we have experienced as supply chain. For example, the availability of supplies, your protective clothing, the masks, the medical supplies, the oxygen, and so on. And the availability of human resources, you know, pressure on staff and on suppliers to produce all those PPEs that were required at the right standard, at the right quality, that would ensure that lives are saved. And one of the other challenges that we have experienced also is the availability of funds to secure the PPEs, whilst the deadlines were becoming tighter. And one of the other challenges that we have experienced is that the other projects within the supply chain value chain were put on hold just to ensure that the country responds to the pandemic to ensure that we save lives, and that all the hands that were available were then put on to ensure that the pandemic is kept. The other challenge that we have realized as supply chain professionals is that there was an opportunity for greed. People, there are some South African cases where that have been well documented in the newspapers, where people have overpriced and where that have taken advantage of the situation of the pandemic. But as a response to those challenges, there has been National Treasury, as an example, have put transversal contracts that all the departments throughout the 9 provinces in South Africa, as an example, could procure from. And if we as supply chain professionals, we could get suppliers that could supply at lesser prices than what National Treasury had put forward, that was also accepted to ensure that we save money. And also the coordination by countries and governments had come to the fore. It was no longer, a third world country, a first world country. I think all hands were put to the wheel that we need to save lives. And I think that is one opportunity that has come through this pandemic, that, we are now being seen as in the world as one, and that we can do things better. The other response also to the challenges was the quick decision making, that it has always been said that supply chain is a long-winded route to give service and or goods, but the decision making has been fast-tracked by putting out there the committees that could adjudicate on the tenders, as an example, that were put out to the public. And the use of technology was accelerated. We have seen that working from home has enabled us to have online submission and evaluation of tenders, and that also an opportunity of that, and a response to that is that there is an audit trail. We no longer have rather tenderers or bidders that would say that I submitted on time.
Tebogo, I'm not sure if you're frozen on your side.
Yeah, I think she's frozen on her side.
Okay, while she's unfreezing, Tebogo, are you with us? I think what we'll do is we will, while Tebogo is coming back online, I think hand over to MJ Schoenmaker, who is going to also speak to us a little bit about how procurement has changed and what this means for women. Thank you, MJ.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Genevieve. Thank you for letting myself representing SAPEX here to have a chat with all of you. I think procurement and supply chain they're basically married to each other. We can't do without each other. So I think it's really important that we all talk together, work together, and see how we can manage supply chain management going forward. I'm sure you've all heard of the word VUCA. It's a big word that everyone is using. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I'm afraid to say it's here to stay. And that's something that's really going to impact the supply chain management going forward. As Dr. Gwen said, she said a couple of things I think that we can all agree with, that the spotlight is now on supply chain management. And, the COVID pandemic is not a positive thing. But one of the positive things about it, because I always try to find positive out of negative, is that it's an opportunity. It has actually exposed to us where we need to improve and what we need to do. And I have to say, I was interviewed a couple of times during that in July about the pandemic. And I have to say that if you think about what happened and how the shelves were empty, you saw that the big retailers were actually able to get the shelves filled up pretty quickly. I don't want to go down the toilet paper route, but there was a lot of stockpiling. Everyone was saying, let's stockpile, because we don't know where the next food or drinks are coming from. So our drinks certainly did disappear. We all knew that. Not fun for South Africans. But I have to compliment the retailers, and I have to compliment supply chain and procurement as to how quickly they were able to fill the shelves. I mean, a day or two later, the shelves were filled again. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom with regards to supply chain. But when you look at the smaller SMMEs, I think that is where the squeeze was, because these big retailers obviously have more inventory, they have more stock, they normally have 2-3 weeks anyway in the market, and they are able to pull from a different warehouse and manage their procurement and supply chain processes easier, especially if they have more cash flow. If you look at the small SMMEs, and especially the little shops, if we talk about what happened in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng with the riots, those poor people, they're the ones that suffered. They don't have the cash flow. If their inventory is gone, they haven't sold anything, and they're not able to replenish. So this is where I think, the highly negative side of what happened was there. I was also asked to be on a working group for the ports of Durban. And I don't know if you understand really or can imagine the impact that it had on the ports of Durban. So just to give you a little bit of context, the ports of Durban move 5,000 containers a day. They lost 6 days because of the riots, and they lost 6 days because Transnet systems went haywire. So you have to just do the maths, and you can imagine how many containers were in backlog. For procurement people, that's an absolute nightmare, because you've already worked out what you've procured, when it's going to arrive. And what ended up happening? Empty shelves and production lines standing still, which is a disaster for every company, right? Your assets are not being used. The importance of an efficient and transparent supply chain is key to every company's success and every government's success. And I think Dr. Gwen spoke to that as well, where you have automated workflows. And I'm sure Genevieve from Deloitte, you know all about the digital landscape as I do, as to actually also, even for the SMMEs, there is software around that can cost you 3,000 Rand a month. And you can still manage your inventory and forecast what you need, how to manage what's arriving, what isn't arriving. I think that's a great change to what I would like to call the olden days, which was yesterday, where every company felt they had to implement all these huge softwares that take 1 or 2 years to get going, cost the company an absolute fortune. And in the end, everyone's still using Excel, because they just can't manage the system. And I can see Genevieve laughing, because I think we know that area very well. So I think that is great. All these apps that have arrived, that all these things that are on the net that you can use very, very easily, you can just subscribe. And if you don't want to use it anymore, you unsubscribe. So it's really become like being a subscription on Spotify. You can subscribe to an inventory management system. You can subscribe to a MRP system. So these things, I think, need to be more advertised and need to be more out there, so that people realize, even the small little companies, you can do something. There is something that can help you. Talking a little bit about some stats, because Genevieve, you gave us some nice stats. So I'm just going to give you one from one of your competitors, PwC. And they spoke about the trends in South Africa. So in South Africa, only 13% of South Africa's executive directors are women. This includes CEOs and CFOs. So that gives a wonderful number of 81 women. Just think about that for a moment. There are 81 women in South Africa out of all the companies in South Africa that are either a CEO or a CFO. If you look at the Fortune 500 companies, that's 8%. That's quite a sad figure, I think. And this is stats from 2021, so this is this year. So just to see that everybody is listening, I'm going to ask who knows which country has the highest proportion of female CEOs in the world. You can put it in the chat. No Googling now, huh? Let me see. Who knows the answer?
No Googling. You're not fair, MJ.
No Googling. No Googling. Just try and imagine. I'm seeing some answers flying in here. So I see USA, America, UK, Australia, UK, Singapore, I guess. So actually the answer is Thailand. So when I looked at this and thought about this, I thought it must be Scandinavia somewhere. It must be in one of those countries. So Thailand has the highest proportion of female CEOs in the world. They have 30%. And the next country that follows is actually China. They have 19%. So these are the countries actually we should be looking at to say, what are you doing right? Okay, so we know we've always looked at all those other big countries, but it's actually not the case. So what can companies do to prepare across for pandemics like this? And remember, the pandemic is an event. It's other things are going to happen. Just because it happens to be called COVID, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. So one of the most important things is to do a health check of your business, to do some sort of assessments and to make sure that across people, process, and technology, what are you looking like? And what I find is often companies think they're really good, but they don't know what good looks like. So they compare themselves to themselves. And it's like, you know, Einstein said, if you keep doing the same of the same, you'll always get the same. So make sure you check yourself across people, process, technology, find out what good looks like, get some help to find out what good looks like, and then understand where you are vulnerable. Like an example, procurement. Do you have a single supplier for your most important product? Well, I would be terrified if that was the case, right? You can't just have one supplier. If something happens to that one supplier, you are lost. Your most important product is standing, the production line is standing. And what about a risk management process? So when you look across your business, try and find out does your risk lie. That example of one supplier is a big risk. Check where your risks are and make sure you have clear procedures. So if an event happened, who does what? So what you find, and I think that was a lot of cases with when COVID happened, is that everyone started panicking and everyone started running to their Excel spreadsheets, and it takes you a week to find out what's going on. I was working with a very small company. I gave them a very cheap software package, and they said if they hadn't had that package, they would have been completely lost because their whole business was only looking at that software. So if everyone has their own little Excel on the sideline, it causes confusion, and there's not one number. The first part of the meeting is which number is the right number, which is a complete waste of time. Segregation of duties, and that talks a lot to what happened in the US with Enron. I don't know if you remember where that business absolutely collapsed, and the top level of executives took all the pension funds of the company, sold the shares behind the backs of everybody else, and in the end they were called to task. I know a couple of them actually committed suicide, and as a result of that, the law called SOX came out. So for those of you who work with American companies, you would know SOX. It stands for Sarbanes-Oxley. And what happens with that is that there is a very clear segregation of duties. So to avoid corruption, to avoid unethical behavior, buyers cannot be sellers. Sellers cannot be buyers. So they segregate the jobs. They have clear roles so that no one actually has the chance even to do something they're not allowed to do. And Dr. Wen spoke a lot about, and Genevieve, you also mentioned it is really about, that digital transparency. A lot of the latest technology have workflows that are connected to roles, and you can actually monitor what people are doing. And the manager of that person will get a little note saying, that person's in the red because they haven't done what they were supposed to do. Something's missing in the process. So it's really about digital management and digital role control. Talking a little bit in the area of leadership, I gave you some stats about women in leadership. Genevieve spoke to as well. Dr. Gwen spoke about it. And I think one of the most important things is something you've all heard is about diversity and inclusion. And diversity and inclusion isn't just about gender, right? It's about sexual orientation. It's about color. It's about lifestyle. Diversity and inclusion is about accepting people as to who they are and ensuring that there's engagement and inclusion across the way. So keeping everyone on board and appreciating the differences. It's always good to have someone who's negative and throws the cat amongst the pigeons when you have a team, because they make you think. They make you realize, maybe I haven't thought of everything. So you always be appreciative of them, even if they irritate you. Men and women need to support each other in the interest of the business. There's a big thing called unconscious bias. So everyone was brought up in a certain way. So you may have been brought up to think redheads have a bad temper, right? Or women are not as smart as men. So when people go into a meeting, they walk in there with an unconscious bias. They walk in there saying, there's the two women in this room. Women don't know what they're talking about, so I'm already not going to listen to what they have to say. That is an unconscious bias, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. And that's what we need to work on. That is what has to be looked upon from the leadership, top down and bottom up, to say, guys, we're having a meeting today. If anyone has some unconscious bias, let me explain what it is. And any thought that you had when you came into this room related to that, please put it to the side and let's all work together to get a conclusion from this meeting and drive the business forward. So gender diversity is important. They actually say, the Women Deliver organization said that when women hold more executive leadership positions, the company is more profitable. Companies in the top quartile of gender diversity on executive teams are 21% more likely to outperform the national average. So you know money talks, right? If we all say, as women, we want to be in the boardroom, they're going to say, great, that's nice. You know, if you have the right skills, that's fine. But if you actually say that you can actually outperform the national average by 21% just by having more gender diversity on your team, then all the ears start to open, right? So you have to bring an argument that's not just about the gender, but about what does it bring for the business? And that's what's really, really important. So I hope this was all helpful. I saw there's a lot of things going on in the chat. I don't know if there's any questions. Otherwise, Genevieve, I'm going to pass back to you, and you can do all the questioning from your side.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, MJ. And that was very, very insightful. I loved how you made that extremely, extremely practical. So in the interest of time, I'm going to reduce the number of questions that we were going to pose quite a bit. I know I have a ton of questions. And a couple of the questions we had planned on discussing have already been asked. So Dr. Hilda, I was planning to ask you about how supply chains are transforming through technology and transparency, and how can procurement and public sector lead as a force for good in this? Do you have anything very quick you would like to build on comments that have already been said in this regard?
Thank you. With regards to supply chain, we find that we need to have transparency in the whole process. And also now, due to COVID stipulating that we need to do everything, e-procurement is becoming very important, where all organizations, even public sectors, whether in the rest of Africa, whether South Africa or the rest of other African countries, are actually trying to go with e-procurement, which means everything to be done online and to reduce our papers, which is also in the interest of sustainability and the environment. So you will find that with that, it also brings transparency, but also brings some challenges to those small SMEs or women or maybe previously disadvantaged people who might not have access to Wi-Fi or how expensive data is. But I think going to the future, that's where we'll be going to. What also I wanted to bring across, maybe as CIPS, from CIPS side, is that to also prepare for the future, I think we also need to keep on upgrading ourselves. So maybe as CIPS members to try and be to attend the MCIPS. And also this will actually also make us ready for positions that will be like your CFOs and your executives, if you are qualified, especially if you have the qualification and then added to that the experience. So going forth also, I think also for us to be able to pick up these opportunities, as women, we should keep on upgrading ourselves, trying to attend the MCIPS. And also you'll find out from the research, one of the things is that they find out that there is almost like 62% of the adverts in South Africa requesting that a person have some kind of a CIPS qualification for a procurement role, and also with about 40% reporting in the 2021 procurement salary guide that they're not able to find this particular candidates to fill in this gap. So I think I'll just say in conclusion, just to encourage leaders to go through all the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hilda Mafunga. Tebogo, sorry about the connectivity glitch earlier, but to give you an opportunity to close as well, I'd like to pose you the question that Shazi Amoy posted on our live chat, which is, are there strategies around creating awareness and understanding of procurement as a profession to draw the youth to this as a vocation?
Thank you, Genevieve. I don't know if everybody can hear me.
We can, thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Right. Okay, thank you. Yes, there are strategies that we are putting in place to try and draw the youth to the supply chain profession. As we have, for example, in Gauteng, the CIPS Gauteng branch, we have a committee that is looking at doing open days at schools to catch the students whilst they are still in your grade 9, 10, 11 and 12 before they go to university, so that when they get to university we can explain to them that supply chain is a profession, and it's a profession that is recognized. For the other strategy that we are looking at is that we have roundtables that we are organizing for all the supply chain professionals and those people that are interested in understanding what supply chain is all about. And we are doing all those roundtables, and invitations are being sent out. I think people that are in this summit can just look out for the CIPS Gauteng branch events that are taking place. Also, as a strategy, what we are doing is that the committee members have agreed that we will launch influential men and women that are in supply chain that can come and share their experiences within supply chain and educate the public at large, as well as the supply chain professionals, about the challenges and the opportunities that are there within the supply chain as a profession. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tebogo. MJ, our last question, and if we could ask for a brief response to this one in closing. What do you recommend as the first step an organization should take in response to volatility to be able to prepare for future events?
Thanks, Genevieve. Well, I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's really, making sure you know where you're vulnerable, where your risks are, and understanding really what good looks like. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same result. And if you did not manage the pandemic well, if you did not manage the volatility and the uncertainty well, then there's something not right. Huh? So it's quite obvious that something needs to be done. A lot of people are talking about digitizing and making everyone very nervous about, what about my job though, if the computer is going to do everything. A computer can never do everything. A computer could not have managed or known or predicted COVID. You can forecast as much as you want, but this little virus did whatever it wanted to do. So the point of digitization is to make sure that there's exception management. So you don't look at every single thing, but you actually manage your business by creating the task or changing the tasks that are very mundane into being automated. But we need people, we need the brains, we need the heads to understand what to do, right? The computer is not going to tell you what to do. It's just going to tell you what happened. I think especially also with your suppliers, what often happens is sort of an old-fashioned way of doing business is I'm going to squeeze that supplier as much as possible and get the cheapest price out of him. That is not going to work anymore. You need to create a win-win relationship with your supplier. What can I do for you What can you do for me? Do some collaborative forecasting. Ask that supplier, you know, how is your supply chain looking? How can I help? This is what my supply chain is looking like. I just won a new customer. They're expecting X, Y, and Z. How can you help me? That is how we should be doing business now today. That old-fashioned way of squeezing your suppliers is not going to work anymore. And you're actually going to be putting yourself at risk. And maybe a little bit talk to the ladies of how to manage what's going on in the leadership space. I'm sorry, it's going a little bit off topic, Genevieve. Think about that unconscious bias. You also have unconscious bias. You just don't realize it, right? Everybody is brought up in a different way. And it's not a negative thing. It's something you just need to manage if it's not appropriate as into what you're doing. If you can get a coach, and let them be brutally honest, right? Let's be brutally honest with each other to say, why am I not getting somewhere? What can I improve on? What can I do better? What did you do that got you where you were going? And partner with your male colleagues. I think a lot of the guys are really on board. They want to be working with us. There are some old-fashioned ones. I spent most of my life outside of South Africa. I spent my formative years here, and I've been here now for 7 years. I decided to return to this beautiful country. A lot of people ask me why, but I think it's great here. And what I've found a little bit is that there's still a little bit of an old-fashioned twinge there between the men and the women. And I think we just need to get together but don't wait for something to happen. Don't sit back and say, I brought good results. Now everyone's going to notice. No one's going to notice because they're going to say that was your job. So that's what you need to do. Have a look at your job description. What are you doing more? So don't wait for something to happen. It's in your hands. You make sure something happens. And do whatever you can about unconscious bias. Talk to your colleagues. Get a coach who's male, preferably, or a successful female, to make sure that you understand the other side. We don't know what other people are thinking. We don't know why people do the things they do. Again, that unconscious bias is so important and is highly underestimated. So if you feel that you're not getting somewhere, and I had that in my career as well, I want to be a director, and it never happened. And then my boss sent me on a women leadership. I had a great boss, a guy. I've always had men as bosses. He sent me on a women's leadership course here in Cape Town, actually, by the university, the Graduate School of Business. And I was based in Europe. And he sent me here to Cape Town. I was so happy, finally back in South Africa. And he said, you need to go in a women's leadership and you need to slow down. You need to think, to go through that thinking space, and things will happen when they're supposed to happen. And it happened. One day he walked to my desk and says, guess what? You're a director as from today. And I nearly fell off my chair. And at that point, I wasn't wanting it anymore. I was just thinking, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do and try and get to that position. So it's in your hands. Make sure that you do something about it. Be self-critical. Don't assume that it's you or somebody else, but just talk to people, talk to different people, and find out how you can improve. I hope that was helpful.
Fantastic, MJ. Thank you very much. Very inspiring, very empowering. And in closing, to almost build on that, I'd like to note that agile and resilient organizations need agile and resilient leaders. So may this quote that I've taken a little bit of liberty to adapt slightly by Bo Taplin hold true for all of us leading ladies in procurement and supply chain. She was unstoppable, not because she did not have failures or doubts or there was uncertainty around her, but because she continued on despite them. May we all be the change that we would like to see in this world.